I would almost feel guilty, like being angry with God at the moment, because I'm like, I didn't want, and I know this is not the God we serve, but at the moment I was thinking, I don't want to let God know how I'm truly feeling, because I don't want him to take Parker away from me, because I don't want him to think that I'm not grateful for where Parker is.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the show. On behalf of Disciple of City, I'm Todd Carlton, and this is the Toddcast. Friends, follow us along on YouTube, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're on 18 different streaming platforms. Whatever your friends are on, we're there. Share it with them. Friends, Disciple of City exists to equip Christians with simple tools on how to share the gospel and make disciple-making disciples. And you can find more out about that at our website at discipleofcity.ca. We'd love to hear from you, too. You can email us at information@discipleofcity.ca with any questions and tell us what you think about the podcast. We also have a free video series on the website that you can check out. And you can also look at the toddcast.ca website with a direct link to our latest episode. We're on socials, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. And thanks today to executive producer Caden Carlton and media relations Sheila Juty. Well, friends, we're heading down south of the 49th again today to talk to some of our American friends. If you have been tracking along last year, season 4, episode 17, we had Parker Byrd. He's a Division I baseball player at East Carolina University. And what made that story so powerful is that he had lost his leg in a boating accident and was able to step back out onto the baseball field. So today, we're going to chat with his parents, who are originally from Laurinburg, North Carolina. They moved to Greenville to support their son when this all had happened. They both actually attended the same university that their son attended. Their dad is a pediatrician, and his mom has done some prison outreach and public speaking engagements. Please welcome Mitzi and Dr. Jeff Byrd. Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good, thank you.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for taking time to chat with us today.
Of course.
There, we calm down our studio audience and get the band to stop playing, and we can we can start. Yeah, as I was saying to you guys just off the air, with both my wife and I being first responders in addition to ministry and stuff and parents, it just, you know, your son's story really captivated our hearts, but more so because of the social media aspect and his passion and genuineness for the Lord. And after interviewing him, it's obvious that or to me as a father anyways, that faith background came from, you know, that being instilled in his life. So for you guys, before we get into all that, can you just share, whoever wants to go first, what your faith upbringing was like for you guys as kids?
Yeah, well, I was raised Christian in a Methodist church, was practically there every time the doors were open, but it was a small country community little church. Half the congregation was related to me, but yeah, I definitely had, especially my mom, a very praying mother. So you know, my father, you know, was a believer as well, but my mom was the one who really had us at church and had us involved in everything.
And for me, I grew up also as a Christian in a Pentecostal holiness church, so we were loud, and you know, my dad is now a pastor, but has always just been, I think, a believer since the age of 15. And, you know, my fatherly advice from my dad when I would always have issues, I'm like, hey, Dad, this is going on. And his response was always, hey, the Lord's taking care of it. Just pray about it. So that's kind of how I was brought up, is just the Lord is in charge of everything. And, you know, that's kind of how we grew up, you know, just believing that God is in control.
Did you guys, as you grew up, you know, a lot of, when people are growing up in church, you know, it's your family, it's your upbringing, it's the example that you've been given. But then as you get older and sort of exposed to the world, did things change for you guys? Or was there sort of a moment where Jesus became more real to you? Or was your just upbringing so strong and those roots were planted so firmly that you just knew you were separated from that, if that makes sense?
There's times I think for us, like, we got married, we were high school sweethearts and started dating when we were 16. We came to college together. Then I went to med school here and we got married when we were 23. And, we were busy. And there was times in our life I can say that, we didn't go to church the way we did when we were like kids and stuff like that. And after Parker was born, Mitzi was a NICU nurse at the time. And so we didn't want to put Parker in daycare. So a lot of times she would work weekends and my parents would come up on the weekends to watch Parker. So, for a long time, not that we didn't believe or we're not Christians or anything like that. We just didn't always go to church on a regular basis, but we definitely have always, made sure we worship and read our Bibles and, just stayed in God's path. But, as far as attending church, there was probably an 8-9 year period where it was kind of tough for us to get to church on a regular basis.
Well, especially if you're both working in the hospital field and shifts and all the rest.
Yeah, they don't. It's definitely not an 8 to 5 job for
So
sure.
you guys got married. You had Parker. Your careers are going on. Obviously, you're instilling the trueness of the Lord in with your kids and how was life just leading up to the incident with Parker for you guys?
Honestly, everything was great. The highest of highs leading up into the accident. We also have Parker has 2 younger sisters. So, we had a junior in high school. Well, she was about to start her junior year, and our youngest was about to start 5th grade. So we had those 2. We were really excited. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom. He had a successful, he was a partner of a very successful business in a small town. Like we knew everyone. Our family was around locally. We're excited about what was to come with Parker. We were in the process of buying a little town home here to stay in to come watch the games on the weekends. So we were excited.
It was one of those things like Mitzi and I had taken a vacation together that summer, and we had just gotten back from Yellowstone. But the whole time we were in Montana and Wyoming, Parker kept on calling us like, "Hey, I got my number. I got my glove that I want." The kid that was playing shortstop for East Carolina got drafted while we were there. So, we thought God was lining him up for Parker to be starting shortstop as a freshman. And, we had worked from the moment Parker was really young to become a Division I shortstop. And we thought that moment was about to happen. So we were pretty excited. Kind of on a mountaintop for sure.
And that's, I guess here in Canada, it's more hockey. Baseball's a thing too, but it's so a little bit more unattainable, I guess, right? Because in the South or where you guys live in further south, kids can play all year, and up here, right now the snow's up over your knees over here where we are. So if you guys could pray.
Got the teams from the Northeast right now playing south everywhere in the United States. It's hard to play baseball when it's cold.
Yeah. So obviously, like I said, not to focus on the tragedy of it, but really just how this would expanded your faith. Because like you said, you're hopeful that obviously the Lord was forefront for you, right? With your kids and this is what maybe the Lord has planned for your son. Like, when you guys first got the news, obviously he's away. You guys are still in northern North Carolina?
In southern North Carolina. So Greenville's kind of more northeastern part of the state. We were kind of south central part of the state. And, we received a phone call and on that Saturday morning from Parker. He was like, they were about to go out on the boat. We FaceTimed. We're FaceTiming him. And when I was coming back, we were coming back from Yellowstone. I actually heard of the Toronto Blue Jays first base coach his daughter had just got hit by a propeller on like the July 4th weekend and died from the incident. So Parker called us that morning, and I'm telling Parker and all the kids that are on the boat that day, hey, you gotta be careful when you get close to the motor, turn that motor off. And that was kind of how our day was going when it happened. And then like maybe an hour and a half later, I had just left the house when probably 30 seconds, and I received a phone call from them saying, hey, Parker's been hit by a boat. Parker's probably going to die. You need to get here. So I turned around and pulled into a driveway, ran indoors, and just yelled at Mitzi, hey, come, let's go. Parker's been in an accident. Let's go. And we got in the car and just flew up I-95. I mean, I'm at times probably doing 110, 120 miles an hour trying to get to him, because all I was trying to think is, I mean, I just don't want him to die alone. So,
man,
when we got here, he was already in surgery. So that was one good thing. He was still alive when we got here.
So when you got there, was the news a little better in the sense that he's in surgery, or were you still kind of teetering on that he might pass away?
It was a big unknown. We didn't know. We were kind of getting mixed reports from the kids on the boat, like the severity of the trauma. And realistically, I knew that it was probably pretty bad, because the accident only happened about 45 minutes away, 45 minutes to an hour away, and they flew him in. So, I kind of knew that, okay, if you're not going to take an ambulance for 45 minutes, this is bad, typically. But there was the longest waiting period, because we didn't know. We had no idea, like, the severity of it. Like, one kid was, it's just some cuts. And then another kid was, no, he was dying. And so, they're a bunch of 18-year-olds. So, but he was in surgery for hours. And
the worst part, though, was when we got to the hospital, we go into the emergency rooms, like, hey, we're looking for Parker Byrd. And they're like, we don't have anybody by that name. And Parker's first name is Jeffrey. And I'm like, do you have Jeffrey Byrd? And like, no, we don't have a Jeffrey Byrd. And then all of a sudden I start panicking and like, oh, he's dead. Like, but because he was a trauma and he was 18, they gave him an alias name, which still don't understand why, but his name was Joe Unrose in the system, but we couldn't find him anywhere. So our first thought when we got here was like, something's bad has happened, but then he was in surgery for a very long time. And I think he probably came out of surgery at like 9:30, 10 o'clock that night. He was probably in surgery 7 to 8 hours. And, the surgeon comes out, and
a lot of surgeons come out.
A lot of surgeons come out, because it was like the trauma surgeon, the vascular surgeon, plastic surgeon, the general surgeon. They were all in there trying to, one, save his life, and then get the bleeding to stop. But, we had talked to a bunch of 18-year-olds who, we went from he's dying to, I think they're trying to, now at this point, trying to make it seem it wasn't as bad to comfort us. So in my head, like, I start thinking about what Parker loves the most, and that's baseball, right? So the surgeon comes out, Parker's out of surgery. The first question I asked the guy is like, hey, will he be able to play baseball again? I mean, I knew that's what Parker was going to want to know. And the surgeon looks at me like I'm an idiot. And at the moment I probably was. And he goes, he's alive, and that's all I can tell you. And so at that moment, it was like, for me, put it into perspective how severe it was.
Did they know you were a physician?
Not at that time.
See, that's the whole other level of it too. I mean, there's the parent thing, but then, Mitzi, you as a NICU nurse, and I mean, you guys have that deeper, that if it's not a land ambulance and it's a chopper, it's a totally different thing. And anatomy and there's just a different perspective on the surgery and what's going on. And, I mean, that just must have been so much. Now, when you guys were, I'm trying to put myself in that position, right? Did you guys, in the hospital, were you just calling out to the Lord, like in your heart or together? I don't know what I'd like to think that's what I'd be doing, but I don't know where my headspace would be at.
Oh, I was pleading with God nonstop. That's, we weren't ever really together because, they still had COVID restrictions at the time, and he was in the trauma ICU. So there could only be 2 people per day, but 1 at a time. And we had to leave his room and switch out in the lobby. So of course it was myself and Jeff were the 2 people that were with him 24/7. So, there was a lot of talking for me personally with God, because Parker was out most of the time. Like, they had him on heavy drugs. So it's just me sitting in a room alone. So there was a lot of conversations with God at that time for me. It was tough.
Yeah, it was one of those things, like, I mean, just to do it in isolation. And, it was hard because, like, how you go from one moment where things are so great to like the lowest of lows. And, after his first surgery, gosh, I just remember laying there that night, because I stayed with him that first night, and I remember holding his hand like all night long and like just praying. Like, I prayed like all night long for him, just the emotion of like just wanting him to be okay and just pleading with God. So, every time you would let your mind get into a space of like anger or sadness, I would almost feel guilty, like being angry with God at the moment, because I'm like, I didn't want, and I know this is not the God we serve, but at the moment I was thinking, I don't want to let God know how I'm truly feeling, because I don't want him to take Parker away from me, because I don't want him to think that I'm not grateful for where Parker is.
Right.
So,
yeah.
There was definitely a lot of emotion, and it didn't help that they wouldn't let you have anyone else with you,
Yeah. But it's so real, right? Like, I mean, that's so real to be angry. Like, why, and all those questions, how could this happen? And
right.
But at this,
our minister here, our preacher here, like one day after Parker gets out of hospital, we go to church for the first time at that church, and I go pick our, at the time, 5th grader out of children's church, and I'm coming out, and the pastor's talking to the rest of the family, and he looks at me and he's like, "Man, how are you?" And that's all it took, is just like I started weeping, like, because I just knew I was in a moment where I was not very good, and he said to us at the time, like, it was so true. And this is something that we've tried to tell other parents that are going through what we went through. Is it's okay to feel more than one emotion, that God allows you to feel more than one way. And, there's a kid in Texas right now, and Mitzi has reached out to the mom that, got in an ATV accident. The other night, she just tells her, like, it's okay to be angry, because that's a relationship most people have with their parents anyhow. It's like, it's a conversationalist type relationship where you can talk to your father, you can talk to your parent, you can say, "God, I'm not very happy with you right now," but at least for me in that moment, it helps you realize, like, as long as you're talking to God and he's with you, he's with you. You know what I mean? In valleys and on mountaintops, I've realized God's there. I think a lot of times people often forget when they get to a mountaintop that they got there by themselves. I've now realized I only got to that mountaintop because I was in the valley. God pulled me to that mountaintop, and I now run God everywhere I go. I don't ever let it be a moment that I don't give God credit for where we are in our life.
Yeah. How, after you guys realized, okay, he's going to live, What did the next kind of part faith-wise look like for you guys? And when the surgeons at some point they'd find out that you were a physician, so then they're going to talk to you totally differently, right?
Yeah, so it's July 1st. So I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in the United States, July 1st is a very important day in the medical life. Like, you graduate med school and you start residency July 1st, right? You're intern June 30th, and you're now a senior resident July 1st. So you become definitely more in charge. Well,
it's the wrong month.
It's the wrong month to get hurt because you went from not knowing very much, now you're in kind of charge of other people who don't know anything. So it's kind of a scary situation. So he's in a trauma ICU, and I would listen to the rounds every day because I wanted to know what was going on, right? Like, what's going on? What's your plan for today? When's our next surgery? Because he initially doesn't lose his leg for like 12 days. So we went from, thinking he was going to die to the point where, his leg was doing better. The plastic surgeon thought that he was going to be able to save his leg. But they would go in rounds and you would hear him say, "This is Parker Byrd. He has 7 lines in." I'm like, 7 lines? He has 2 lines in. He's on gabapentin, which is a medicine. He's not on gabapentin. He's on Lyrica. Parker had, this or that. And I finally got to the point I would started interjecting to the point, like when that trauma ICU attending would come around, he just wanted me to present what was going on with Parker each day because he trusted me more than he did the residents or the med students. And Parker really at that moment realized I need my parents. And when things got really tight at the end, he wouldn't let me walk out of his sight. Like, if I were going to try to go to the bathroom, "Daddy, where are you going? Where you coming right back," right? Because he didn't want me never not to be there just in case something would happen.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think it was such a roller coaster because, like you said, we didn't know if he was going to survive. And then it went from, okay, he's going to survive. We were still praying that because he still had some funky infections and stuff going on. So it was still...
And then became really hypertensive.
Yeah, there were still a lot of things, a lot of risk that were still present. But, we're very hopeful because we thought that both of his legs were severely injured. And we thought that they would be able to save him. And so, during the whole time, we're just pleading with God, please, let them heal. Please save them. Please let them have function. Because that was another thing. We didn't know if they even were able to save the legs, especially his right leg, because that foot never moved. We didn't know how much function it would have. And we didn't want him to have a dead foot. That's, no good. So, then you go from that to, no, we can't save the foot. And, for a while, they were going to have to take his knee as well. I don't remember if he talked about that in his podcast, but his knee was completely dead, and his right knee. And so even after the amputation, they amputated it below his knee only because like all of his muscles in his upper leg were still too shredded to like make a stump, like pull the tissue around and sew it up. So they were given all of that muscle and tissue time to heal. And their plan was to go in once it healed and to take his knee as well. And that was devastating. As devastating as it is to take your lower leg, we knew with mobility, it's a whole different ballgame if you don't have a knee. So every day I was like, you were talking about social media, I was on Facebook pleading with people, please pray for his knee. please pray that the blood flow will come back to the bone and the tissue. And realistically, I was thinking, well, Mitzi, even if it comes back, it's been gone for so long. I mean, it's probably necrotic, it's dead, but sure enough, it came back. And we even saw like afterwards, like through with his physical therapy, because we never saw it. They took photos during surgeries. So we never got to see it because it was always wrapped up. And the physical therapist showed us all of the photos during surgeries, and you could see it was black. It was completely dead.
Wow.
And slowly with each surgery, it was a little pinker and a little pinker. And the plastic surgeon came out to us one day and said, I don't want to get your hopes up, but there's a trickle of blood in the bone marrow of his bones. So we're going to hold off on cutting anything else, and we're just going to see where this goes. And so, I'm just begging people, please pray, please pray. And, over.
After the neck surgery, there was so much blood flow. The plastic surgeon didn't even mention it to us. It's kind of like it was never a thing. But we had 3 surgeries and 2 different plastic surgeons tell us on occasions he's going to lose his knee. And, which was, like she said, very devastating because I knew he would never play baseball. Like, if you don't have a knee joint, you can't run. I mean, prosthetics are so good, and there's tons of people doing amazing things that are above the knee. But it would just been really hard for Parker to play. And I say that to him one night. I'm like, hey, Parker, they wanted us to tell Parker he was going to lose his knee because they knew he trusted us, right? And so I'm like, do you know what that means? And he's like, no, sir. And it's like, man, you're never going to play baseball again. And luckily, his mom's sitting in the room with us at the time, and she goes, wait. Nobody tells you what you can and cannot do. So only God can tell you that, right? And she's like, don't you put limits on him? Only God can put limits on him, And luckily for Parker, she definitely, I don't know if she truly believed it or if God was talking through her to him, because like one night in the hospital, like Parker's sitting there one night, I don't think he shared the story with you, but he looks at his mom and says, hey, Mom, I don't think I'm ever going to play baseball again. And she's like, Parker, why would you say that? And he's like, well, almost looked at her like an idiot. It's like, well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm kind of missing a leg right now. Nobody's ever played Division I baseball with a prosthetic leg. And she said, well, there always has to be a first. Why not you? And Parker's always been the kid that if you give him a goal, or if you can tell him he's not going to do something, it would drive him to do it. Like, he's very motivated by doubt. He was at one time the 126th best player in the country in high school, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's draft worthy. Like, he's that good, right? And on his dry erase board up in our weight room, he wrote the number 126 because he didn't feel like there was 126 kids better than him in the country. So luckily Mitzi's sitting there that day and goes, why not you? And he's like, yeah, why not me? So his mindset at that moment flipped to what's next. So he never looks too far ahead. He never looks behind him, but what's next? And I mean, that took him from a very sad and like, I don't know what I'm going to do to I'm playing baseball again.
And he did say that, Mitzi. He mentioned he did say that in the episode that I did with him, and I felt the presence when he said it then, and just now when you said it too. Yeah.
I do feel that God was speaking through me, because it's hard to give your child who is completely lost and devastated and heartbroken the right words. I didn't know if it would happen or not, but I did know in my heart that we could not put limitations on him. And I had said from the beginning, like, even though I was angry and I was sad, And I was grateful that he was alive and we still had him. And like Jeff said, felt guilty for being mad because we did still have him. And we had friends who had lost a child. And I thought, well, they would love to have their child here with one leg. Like I still have him in my life. I still get to see his smile. And so all these feelings were just kind of stirring. But I remember just finally having a conversation with God. And I said, God, you loved him first and you love him more. As hard as that is for my mind to even comprehend, I know you do. And you knew that this was going to happen before you even sent him to us. You knew this was in his story. And I'm just going to have to trust that I don't think you caused this to happen, but certainly he could have stopped it from happening. He allowed it to happen. So if you're going to allow this to happen to him, then you have to have something big in store for his future, bigger than what we had in store for his future. So I just have to trust you with this path that if you're allowing this to go this way, then you have a plan and there's a purpose behind it. So I knew that we couldn't put the limitations on him, that it was, God's story.
At what point did you guys sort of feel a peace in the Lord with this whole thing? Like, you know what I mean? Where, initially it's so many things and angry and praying and all that. And obviously this isn't, because you said he had his leg for 12 days and then they were going to have to take it, maybe the knee, and all these different sort of possible scenarios. But at what point did you at this time sort of feel a peace in the Lord of that, what, just like what you said, the Lord knew this was going to happen. He's got a plan, and you know what I mean? Like, and everything's going to be
okay.
I feel like we still, from day to day, struggle with that, to be quite honest. I think there are days that we are at peace, that we see the things that he's doing. We see how God is using him and how it has grown his faith tremendously, how he's truly changed as a person. Parker used to be quiet and shy and not very confident speaking to others. And now I watch him do public speaking and podcasts and all this stuff that he's doing. And he's just truly evolved into a different person. And I know that's God. I know that God is doing that. So there are days that I think we see the amazing people that reach out to us saying, he's given me, hope that I can do this, or, we see it, but there's still some days that it's hard. I'm waiting for that to pass, but I think with your kid,
Yeah. I think for me, the day that he had his leg amputated back home, they were doing a prayer vigil that night. It just happened to be they were doing this prayer vigil, hopefully to get the save Parker's leg. They were going to get everybody together in town and the local communities around to come pray. And it just happened to be that day that the schedule was the day that he actually ended up losing his leg. And then there were like 8 or 9 people who gave their life to God that night.
wow.
And some of the kids that were from like rival high schools and gave their life. But there was also this dad that really loved Parker, and his son played. That guy's son played baseball with Parker from the time they were like 8 or 9 years old, and the guy has struggled with different things in his life, different vices that's been on his life, and kind of went away from God. And he would text me when Parker was in the hospital. He's like, "Man, I prayed for the first time today in 20 years." And eventually gave his life to God. So I told Parker this. I was like, man, hey, I just want you to know that, he called and told me what's going on, and he gave his life to God. And he said, well, if that took me losing my leg to get Toby into the kingdom of heaven, it was worth it. I guess that's when I first felt peace, that whatever God had planned for Parker was okay.
Wow. That's
It's still the selfish part of me that struggles. Because, it's like baseball season. And, that's what me and Parker did every single night. We went to the cage, we went to the field, and his dream became my dream. And, the selfish part of me still struggles. But man, the spiritual part of me could feel no closer to God than I've ever felt. Our marriage is better than it's ever been. Our family is as close to God as it's ever been. Parker's doing amazing things. His sisters are closer to God. I mean, it's just, you just never know what God's path's going to be for your life. I think the struggle comes when you try to live a life that you plan for yourself, that God has so much more for you that you don't even see, and I think just letting go is hard, but I mean, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, because I know what Parker's doing now is a game changer for so many people. And I know he lets God use him the way that God's supposed to use him. Yeah. And, I mentioned that kid in Texas, somebody reached out to us about the kid, but I look at the mom's Instagram and she's using Parker's post, and she's reposting Parker's posts because she's drawn some motivation, some faith from that. I get letters from people in New York where this kid's going to lose his leg soon, and they send us a message and say, hey, this kid who's trying to live a normal life is going to have to lose his leg. He's looked over for someone he could look up to, and he finds Parker Byrd, and I'm like, I see you, God. I see what you're doing. Yeah. I'm sorry I've ever been in your way, and I'm sorry I've doubted you. So, I mean, I'm at peace, spiritually. I mean, the manly part of me, the human part of me still struggles, as you can tell.
As a dad, right? And that's totally almost expected and normal. And you're getting me too, dude.
I mean, that's why when people are like, hey, do you want to do a podcast? I'm like, hey, let Mitzi do it. And there's times like she'll talk, she'll know I get to a certain point, she can almost tell my voice, like, just want to cry. So she'll take over the conversation, I think I just wanted it so bad for P to play baseball. And I'm like, man, what a shell of a dream I had for him. And, it's like this when I was reading this book in Awe of God, and it was just talking about, how bright it's going to be when God comes back, like how bright the sun, how God's going to be that the sun won't even be able to shine and I'm like, I almost feel that with like if you just get out of God's way and just let what God puts his hand on just shine his light.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just awesome just to see what's going on in Parker's life, for sure.
And it's just amazing how much God is glorified. I mean, I came to faith later in life. I was in my 30s when I came to faith, so I had no grid for Pentecostal, and I can't even remember, Mitzi, the name of the church denomination that I had no grid for it, but it was so real to me. I believe in healing. I would have been, if I knew you guys or whatever, I would have been one of those people praying. I would have totally believed that his leg would be restored, but at the same time, with the medical side, I'm just at a point where I don't know how it works, but I know God can do it. But I also know whatever way that looks like, he needs to be glorified, and he will be.
Yeah.
he will be glorified, right? And whether those surgeons are Christians or not, it's like, it takes a certain kind of person to want to do vascular surgery. I mean, what is that? You know, like,
yes.
And just to hear us, just to hear so many people giving their lives to the Lord in and amongst this.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, you know, I know you wouldn't take any credit for it, but it's your faith and trust and belief in the Lord throughout your life and instilling that in your kids that shows them who he really is.
Yeah. I mean, I remember we had a hard time getting pregnant, and, you know, I just remember praying with Mitzi, like, God, if you ever just give us a son or give us a child, if you ever give us a child, we'll raise him to know you, you know? And, you know, and we struggled for a while, and then we finally eventually got pregnant. And then just remember life got busy, you know, and travel baseball consumes a lot of your weekends, and just not having them in church every time the door's open. But, you know, I can just remember like reading the Bible to them, and just like playing worship music in the car. And like, you know, just, you know, sometimes I would feel guilty not having them in church all the time, but, you know, it's like, we did keep our promise that we were going to raise them to know God, you know, and that's the one thing I can say is, like, I'm glad we never strayed from that promise.
And that is hard. It's same thing here. I know what you're talking about with the baseball and the travel, and I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, the practice and games always seem to happen on youth night and Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, that's the truth.
And so there is that pull, right? Because you don't want to, you know, force a kid not to go to this because of, anyways. That's,
right.
Anyway, moving out of this, so he steps on the field, and I could feel the joy in the story when he shared about stepping on, being at that game, and the coach saying, "Hey, come out," and just you guys and your daughters being there, and you know, just share that story a little bit for anyone who's not heard his episode of that game, you know.
Yeah, it was like the eighth inning, maybe.
Yeah, eighth inning.
And we had been told that, you know, they had told Parker to go warm up because one of our friends is like the media person for ECU athletics. So he had come and told us. So we moved down closer, from the parents section down closer, and it was just surreal. I mean, the emotions, it was crazy, because you're thinking, you know, I mean, even though you wanted to believe and you wanted to have faith, it was still always that question, well, will it really happen, or will he get the opportunity? Or, you know, a lot of things are out of your hands. You can work as hard as you know, every day as everyone else. But, you know, if the coach doesn't put you in and doesn't give you an opportunity, then, you know, so there was a lot of still unknowns if it would happen or not. And, well, you know, they put him in, and the umpire, like, he was so gracious, because I think he was actually behind the plate crying as well. So he took a minute and was pretending to write stuff, and
cleaned off
the plate and did everything he could to give himself a second to get his composure, but also give Parker his moment, because the crowd just went crazy. And
to get to that moment, you know, it was 18 months after Parker had lost his leg, and you had to have a coach who was a believer too, you know, that believed in something greater than just a game, you know. And, you know, luckily Coach Godwin, the head coach at East Carolina, you know, he was during this time just drawing really close to God. And, you know, I've heard of other situations at other schools where kids get injured and the coaches never speak to the kid again, and their values only in their sport. You know, Coach Godwin was never that way with Parker. Even when he got hurt, he was at the hospital a lot and spending time. You know, truly believe that Parker will play again and encourage Parker every way to get back to the game. And I think for him on that night, it was important to get Parker in that game. And it was funny because I think even so many people realized how much God was in Parker's story from the get-go. That night they scored 16 runs. Parker wears number 16, and it was February 16th. So there was 3 16s, right? And the verse of the day on the Bible app that day was John 3:16.
Come on.
I don't know. It was just coincidental, but everybody's like, man, if God is not here tonight, then, you know, but, you know, he got up there and he walked, and I can't remember if it was MLB that night or whoever it was that on their social media posted and said, for someone who never thought will walk again, how prophetic is a walk? And I was like, you know, I didn't even think of it that way, but it was true. Like, and he's had 5 other at bats since then. And, you know, each one of them has been special, and they haven't all been hits and they haven't all been successful. But, you know, I said something to the coach a couple of times last summer I was sitting in his office just talking to him. I was like, man, I really would love at some point for Parker to have a meaningful at bat, meaning runner at second, third, you know, less than one out and Parker gets an at bat. And, you know, this hasn't been long ago. I finally hear God say to me, Jeff, every at bat he has is meaningful, because every time he gets into the box, no matter the score or no matter what's going on in the game, the fact that he's in the box playing a game that no one has been able to do before the way he's doing it gives so many kids or people who love baseball or love sport or have something going on in their life that they've been told no, or you can't, or it'll never happen. And they see Parker do what Parker's doing, and they give people hope. And I'm like, man, there's nothing more meaningful than that. So,
yeah. And, you know, there's such a bigger depth to it, right? I mean, there's motivational speakers, which not that that's bad or whatever, or people that, you know, can encourage people to do things that otherwise they thought they couldn't do. But when you add that layer of truth, right, of God to it, that is God, and all the 16s and John 3:16, man, the day I came to faith is the day that coincidence lost its meaning. There's no coincidence, right? God
is in the details. I've realized God is in the details. There's nothing he doesn't miss. I mean, there's nothing he doesn't have his hand in. And there's, you know, she never lets me say the word luck, because
you've said it twice.
Yeah.
Come on, there's no such thing as luck.
Yeah.
We're not lucky, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So for you guys as parents now, you know, you had mentioned that a bunch of people gave their lives to the Lord just a little while ago. Are people reaching out to you guys as parents? Like, you did talk about a few people reaching out, obviously to Parker, but you guys would be such a huge encouragement faith-wise to people that are going through stuff. Are you finding that's happening?
I feel like, well, yeah, we get a lot of people reach out who their kids are have been through an accident or are going to have an extremity amputated or something. I feel like, but you know, we've had terminal illnesses and, you know, different things like that. But it's typically, for me, parents, other moms reaching out, like, you know, this has just happened to my son or daughter, or, you know, how can I best support them, or how do I navigate this? And
so Parker's in the early process of starting his foundation. It's called Limitless, but spelled like limitless, but with the B, like limitless. But part of that foundation is going to be a mentorship program for people who've lost legs, hopefully to help other people who've lost legs, but also have a section in there where there's a group where parents can help other parents, because it is definitely a journey. Early on, I've tried to encourage Mitzi to write. I mean, she's a phenomenal writer. Like when it comes to just as I think Parker's story really honestly kind of blew up in a way because of her Facebook post. And I think people kind of hung on to her words. But how encouraging she can be. And I think she's kind of done that through her prison ministry now. It's just like she loves to write, but I'm like, there's so many parents and stuff out there that are going through things like that we've gone through that need to hear her voice, need to hear, I guess, other people's voice. But we definitely love to encourage parents. We love to encourage other people who are going through hard things that, you're in the valley right now, but God's there. He's there. I mean, you may not feel it, but he's there.
Yeah. So when are you writing your first book, Mitzi? Because looks like you don't believe what he's saying, but
I'm not sure about that. The whole Facebook thing, we're from a small town, so the story gets twisted very easy. And, it went from Parker being in an accident to our nephew being in an accident to Jeff was driving the boat, So I just started putting out posts because typically for my Facebook before that, I wasn't just such an open book and just putting everything out there. But, I just kind of did that to keep people updated, especially from back home, because we both were getting bombarded with just text and messages and we just couldn't keep up. So I would do, a couple posts per day about what was going on, and apparently I was able, Parker's coach always laughs because Jeff would text the coach an update and he was like, man, I still have no idea what you're even talking about. I'm just going to wait for Mitzi's post.
Because I thought I was talking.
So nurses can even dumb it down more than a doctor can. So, I was able to dumb down what was happening where non-medical people could understand. And, and then it became, people were texting me, what can I specifically pray for? What? And so then I started adding that to my post. Can you specifically pray for this today? This is what we need today. And, that it just kind of escalated from there. But yeah, I'm not sure I'm such a great writer. I don't know. That was, he has more faith in me than myself, I guess.
It's funny though how things get twisted too, because I've been on emergency calls and then read it in the paper in 12 hours, and that's not what happened at all, anywhere even close.
Yes.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the show and just sharing, your story and your lives and just the realness and rawness of what that journey was like with you and the impact of the Lord, and just how many people, Jeff, gave their lives to the Lord that night again?
Well, you talk about the story being twisted. I've heard the day that it happened, it was 8. Somebody told me 9 one time as well, but it's either 8 or 9 people that happened that night, which still was phenomenal.
Oh. And just to hear somebody else say, I haven't prayed in 20 years.
I haven't prayed in 20 years, and it's funny now. Just we go. Parker was. I think he told us to share this. He gave his life at an FCA event, a fellowship, a Christian athlete event. When he was in 9th grade, Daryl Strawberry came to speak at a school, and he walked on the field and gave his life to God. And then, he was a very shy, painful kid to now he goes to FCA events and speaks at Fields of Faith. And, through God's speaking through Parker, people giving their life to God through that organization. That Parker was such, that's how he started his faith journey. It's like God doesn't miss a detail, to the point that he wins FCA Athlete of the Year last week. And now I'm just like, every time he goes into an event and speaks and gives us, people give their life to God, I'm like, it just makes it at peace, makes you at peace. So,
yeah. Well, guys, thanks again. I just had one more question for you, and it can be either of you, but just in the medical, like from a medical perspective, if you guys were, Mitzi, if you were working with some nurses, or Jeff, you were working with some physicians, and that whole thing where you said, the 16th of February, his number, like all those things, and you're working with someone who's not a believer, but they see those and they're really grabbing their attention, and they ask you, like, what does that mean? What would you say to them to help drive home how real God is?
I would say that there's nothing coincidental, that God is in every single detail, that those things that you just think, that's interesting, those are really God whispers. That's God trying to get your attention. He's tugging at you. And that, it's easy to overlook. Even for believers, it's easy to miss those signs from God. But if you're, acknowledge him enough, if he tells us to be still, you'll see it. You'll see he's everywhere. He's in every single second of the day.
Amen. Yeah, thank you again, guys.
Thank you for having us.
My friends, there's some real raw emotion and truth there for believers, just processing through why this can happen and being angry at God and praying for God and asking for his comfort and his assistance. And this is the truth. This is the truth of who he is. And like Mitzi said, God knew this was in the not his plan, but he knew this was going to happen. And he didn't cause it to happen, but we live in a broken world, and these things happen in these broken world. But in the end, he's glorified. And this marriage is strengthened, this family is strengthened, this young man is strengthened. And not only did 8 or 9 give their lives to the Lord that day, but so many more will, hearing this story of the truth of a loving Father. Be blessed, my friends.